Hello and welcome to Anima Zoo. Yes, we are starting a brand new Sandbox Zoo set in a taiga biome, and it is the European Taiga standard flat map that I am going to be using. I'm going to be taking inspiration from a lot of different zoos and places across the globe. However, the main source of inspiration for the general layout, and definitely the entrance area that we're going to be building out today, is Belfast Zoo in Northern Ireland. And if you're wondering why this zoo, I simply googled zoo entrances in images, scrolled and scrolled and scrolled to find something that stood out to me, and eventually I found this one. And I really liked the fact that it was simple, low-key, but also kind of interesting at the same time. That's really what I was looking for. Then I had a little closer look at the zoo layout and geography itself, and that sparked a huge wave of inspiration for me. The main element that stood out was largely the landscape itself that you can see here, because when I set out to create this zoo, I wanted the challenge of creating something on pretty interesting terrain, as I find myself easily defaulting to generally flat paths and layouts to make my life easier. But I find it quite a lot less interesting, and I do like to get out of my comfort zone and push myself, so here we are. And Google is definitely the best source of inspiration if you're ever stuck for ideas on how to start a new zoo. So let's start by talking about the overall plan for the zoo, and I'm going to be modelling the main path network and layout directly from Belfast Zoo, but probably with a few creative tweaks here and there, so not it exactly, but the main network will essentially be the same. So this is the current zoo map, and I love that they've marked out the main walking route which will get you around the entire zoo. I think modelling your ideas or taking them direct from existing zoos, exactly like this, is a great way to at least start, as it gives you clear direction on where things are going, or what you need to actually flow to when you're building your zoo. So we're going to be using this as the main base, but actually when I was doing my research I found an older version of the zoo map which also included this extra area to the left of the main entrance. So I'm going to add that in too, and I'll talk about why a little bit later on. And I think the other thing that really struck me when I was looking at this and trying to plan my zoo was generally the lack of themed animals or areas. Like we have a lion over here, and then a clear African area with the elephants and giraffes over this side. There is a primate section in the middle here, but also primates across other areas in the zoo too. So it's not only limited to this area, which I found quite interesting. So it's quite dynamic in that sense, and I think that's what we're going to do as well. We're not going to have themed animals or continent areas. So I'm going to have what I call zones, but it won't be based on continents or animals, and instead based on essentially the landscape actually, with appropriate animals fitting in that way. So like hillside animals, you'd expect animals that kind of live on the hillside, etc., that sort of thing. So we're going to start off with what I'm going to call the lakeside zone, which is the old, now closed part of the zoo, and we're going to have this as steep hillsides positioned around a lake at the bottom of a valley. And the reason for this is because of the way it's positioned in Google Earth, where the landscape slopes from the right hand side of the zoo right down to the left. I thought actually adding in a lake here and having a proper kind of valley bottom would be quite nice to add. Then we'll have a close encounters area up here, where they currently have a kind of farm area. So we'll do sort of something a little bit similar to that, a bit of a farm vibe there. We will honour the savannah area with the elephants and giraffes, and also the primate area, I think, as well. Then we'll have this mountainside zone, as the terrain is much higher on this side than the other, exactly like in real life. And I'm going to need names for all of these, so let me know suggestions in the comments below. But then I'm a little bit undecided on the rest of this central area. Again, would love to hear your thoughts, suggestions, any animals you'd like to see in the zoo as well. Please do let me know in the comments below. So that's kind of the overall plan, so let's get stuck right into the build. So the first thing that I wanted to do was get in the road which is going to run along the front edge of the map, up the side of the main car park, like the real life version of the zoo. But you may notice here that I'm placing these in on a grid of 4 metres, even though I'm basically doing an 8 metre wide road. Yes, I could just do it on 8 metres to make it easier, but I find when you're connecting other paths into a gridded section, it's much easier when it's also on a 4 metre grid, and you don't get odd curvatures, which sometimes happen. So that's kind of why I do it. And then we can easily snap an 8 metre path into our gridded section anyway to do the more freeform parts, so it doesn't really cause issues from that sense. And I wanted to grid the straight section of the road so that we could easily snap in entrances through to the car park and have it all be parallel and uniform, so the car park's totally parallel to the road that runs alongside it. And I laid down the area for the road and the car park first because I wanted to make sure that I was leaving enough room before placing in the main entrance. I kind of find it easier to work from the edge of the map out for an entrance, particularly when you've got a large car park like we're putting in here. So that's what we're doing. And you can see on Google Earth as well, this car park is massive. We're not doing it that big. We're scaling it down, making it fit our needs for our map and our zoo. So for the car park, I decided to use the tile-stoned path as I like how natural it looks, and this is definitely going to be a more natural-based zoo as opposed to super modern or city-like. So I find this path blends pretty well into the environment and would be much more typical of what you'd find in a more out-of-town attraction such as this. And the design that I'm going for is quite a segregated car park, so we're going to have multiple sections where the cars park with greenery and trees and undergrowth, bushes, that sort of thing in the middle of it, which you'll see come the end. And we also put some logs around the car park eventually as well, which I really, really like. So instead of some kind of concrete border, we've got this natural tiled stone car park ground and then these really nice little log borders to it, which reminds me a lot of some of the national parks near where I live in the UK. So if you're wondering about how I'm going to format this series, it is going to be fairly heavily edited and I'll talk you through each part of the build, my thoughts and logics behind it, as well as inspirations, but I'm only going to show you small sections of each part, rather than speed building through the entire lot. There may be sections of speed build, but it'll mostly be cuts of live action kind of put together with my commentary over the top. And then we'll come back at the end and do a thorough walkthrough of the finished area, so that's really when you can kind of see things come together, and I'll explain what I've done as well then. If you ever have any questions on what I've done or how I've done something, please do ask in the comments or come and join my Discord as well, there is a link in the description. I also have a beginner's guide series which walks you through at a very, very slow pace, and this goes through everything you need to know about playing the game, building aesthetically, literally you name it, it touches on it. And that series is still ongoing, so check that out as well. I'll drop a link into the description for that too. So we have laid down the basis of the car park and the main forecourt, which is going to adjoin directly into the car park essentially. And we'll come back to that a little bit later to do some nice detailing on it. But coming onto the main entrance building itself now. So here we are in Google Earth, and this is what we're going to be doing our own take on today. So it is going to look slightly different. This building's very, very different to this, but we do still have this here. This is going to contain our main staff facilities. And we actually run a staff road up the side of the car park in here to get road access essentially into a staff area at this side, which you'll see a little bit later on. And then in terms of this road as well, the real life zoo actually has staff vehicular access up this side too. Instead, we actually carry this road on and around the mountainside that we put in here afterwards, so that's a little bit different. In terms of the main building, we're going to use the limestone pieces for the white walls. We're also going to use a plaster base to it to get this nice grey base in. And then we do also build ourselves a shelter on the front using some of the flat metal roof pieces in here with some beams, etc. in it. I think the trickiest part of this build, and you'll see me struggling with it in a second, is definitely these glass elements, in particular this glass triangle, which I still haven't quite nailed. At the end you'll see there's some revisions that I still want to make to it, which I will get to further down the line, but we've got the kind of basics of it in there at least. And we will honour the entrance and the souvenir shop, what a brilliant name, exit here, because I think that's quite a nice take, although we make this a little bit slightly smaller. And then the penguin bollards, I absolutely love these. We don't have any kind of bollards like this, but we do have our model penguins, so we'll certainly add those in for decoration. And also this, I'm going to say it's a prairie dog, maybe, coming out of a burrow. I'm not too sure, but that's very cute, but we don't have anything like that, unfortunately, to play around with. So we may skip that element. And I also kind of feel, and I don't want to sound harsh, that it sounds a little bit sort of shabby and run down at certain elements of this zoo. You'll see later on in the series there's one building that we will replicate, which is particularly broken down and in need of some tender loving care, shall we say. So we're definitely going to be adding in flower beds and things like that to make this look a little bit nicer. It's going to be our fantasy version, essentially, of this entrance. So the doors, oh my goodness, the doors. A double door of these is not 2 meters wide, it's not 3 meters wide, it's not 1 meter wide. It's like 2/3 of 4 meters, which is like incredibly annoying when you're trying to fit glass pieces in above it. Thankfully there is a glass panel, which I eventually found, which is actually the perfect kind of width to go above these doors. So we do eventually get there, but I spent ages messing around with these panels to find the perfect ones, because I just didn't want to see any of the joins outside of the necessary areas, so it was pretty fiddly to get in right, but we get there in the end. And then for the doorway, I just framed them with the plain planetzoo metal beam recoloured into black to go with all of our black, and nice contrast to the white actually. That's one thing I really liked about this building. And we framed the doorway either side and then put extra pillars in the middle, and also framed this around the glass panels at the top of the doors as well, which is absolutely necessary for realism around glass panels. They don't just float, you do need some kind of connection in order to make it actually feasible and realistic. And here you can see I found eventually the perfect size glass panel piece here to fit directly above our doors, so I could then lower down the top beam and have a little bit more space in this area. And then we filled in the gap that was left at the top of this to fit to our 4 metre high limestone walls, actually with some of the plaster blocks, again recoloured to black, which I just thought was a nicer aesthetic actually than using one of the metal girdle beams. And because it's a slightly different texture to the metal beams, I think it stands out pretty nicely actually, this really harsh dark plaster block on top of the wall. It doesn't necessarily look like plaster unless you look too closely at it. And then we sink the doors back by 2 metres against the main front limestone walls, just to give a little recess around the doorways, which again I think really helps to add some realism, and is how it appeared to be, at least on Google Earth as well in my research. And then we copy across just half of it for the souvenir shop exit door as well. I didn't want it to be quite as big as the entrance, even though they are the same on the real building. I thought having a smaller exit way was probably a bit more appropriate, and then we just fill in some of the gaps to the side of it with some of our metal beams, which helps to create this kind of corrugated metal wall piece without having to use one of the actual wall pieces. So I like that effect. And for a little bit of difference, we also add the limestone wall above this door rather than a glass panel, just so it looks a little bit different to that main entrance. Okay, so the name. The name, oh my goodness. I've actually recorded 7 episodes of this already. I have over 600 gigabytes of footage in which to edit down into episodes for you. However, 7 episodes in, I have finally realised that this is just animal with the L dropped off. So I'm thinking you're all sat there thinking I've just misspelled Animal Zoo and what a crap name that is. Yeah, it was an odd choice, but anima, I decided on that because it is the Latin for soul, and it also kind of means breathe and life and that sort of thing. So I really liked that essence of the Latin version of this name, which is why I chose it. And literally when I chose it, it did not dawn on me it was animal missing the L. So I think we may come in and change the zoo name later on, because now that I know that, I'm just really not happy with it. So I would love to hear your suggestions in the comments below. Let me know. And then I did this build the long way round, whereas I should have put these plaster bases onto the walls and then copied them to create the wall frame I'm now putting on the plaster base to it as an afterthought. But yeah, it does end up looking pretty nice. And then we come on to adding some of the roof sections of the walls. I'm kind of just working on the front of the building to make sure I've got that right before we start filling in the actual size a bit. So I kind of want to get perspective on the front really, and having that look how I want to based on the reference photos that I've got. So we start by putting in the slopey ceiling over the gift shop area, and of course that's going to be offset by a much taller, much grander ceiling over the glass foyer entrance area, which I have also placed 2 information booths on the side of to act as ticket offices before you actually go in through the main gate, which we'll come on to later. But for the slope of the ceiling, I decided to go for 1 metre slopes for this, so it was a nice gradual slope upwards, because it's actually only 4 lots of 4 metres wide. So it's not too much of an incline when we just do it on 1 metre, but I felt like it was a little bit too much and we were getting too high if we went any steeper than that. And then just before we do come on to the big glass vaulted part of the build, we're going to add in the little veranda area outside the front. So I actually went for some of the 2 metre metal plank wall panels for this, just so it didn't stick out too far over the main zoo sign and out into the entrance. We've already got a 2 metre recess over the doorways as well, so I felt like 2 metres was absolutely plenty to give the effect that we wanted. And then I did do things the slightly easier way, where I added some extra detail to it just to help with the realism before I copied across this one piece onto the whole build. So we add these little metal beams, again just the plain planetzoo recolorable metal beams, coloured in. Actually I think we kind of did a sort of silver colour for this, so it stood out a little bit against the metal. But just to act as support beams for our metal planks over this little veranda area. Because the one thing with this metal plank wall, as much as I do like it, it is incredibly plain, like there's no kind of support details on it whatsoever. So having these, I felt like, again, added just that little bit of extra realism and much more interest to it when you actually stood underneath it. And then we do add one of the big metal girders to the front of it. Now I don't mind the actual end supports on this. I feel like the way they stick out of the sides of the main shelter area actually adds a little bit of interest, and I quite like how that looks. I think it just adds a little bit more texture to the overall front of the building, having those bits of extra metal sticking out. And then we just add a couple of finishing touches to the edges of the walls, again using the thin version of the planetzoo beam, recoloured into black, which just helps to add a little bit more interest and a little bit more depth to the very white plain walls that we have on the front of the building. And then coming on to the big glass wall. Now this caused me so much trouble at the top in a minute. But for most of it was absolutely fine. We used the 2x2 glass panel surrounded on all four sides by, again, the thin planetzoo beam recoloured into black to go in with our theme, and worked for the first couple of layers of this wall. But then obviously we want to get the slope into this as well. And there are in fact no triangular glass panels which don't have the annoying kind of join in them, the actual wall panels, which is really, really frustrating. So it was kind of a choice between using the edgeless glass, which is really hard to line up, and if there's any overlap to it as well, it all kind of looks a little bit wonky close up. So I'm not like the biggest fan of that. I really just wanted to use the plain glass panels that I had been using. But again, limited in options. We did decide to go for, unfortunately, just the glass roof bolted triangle pieces, which has these annoying little brackets in it, which we don't cover up because I wanted to keep our 2x2 meter pattern with the 3 panels kind of going across all the way to the top. So it definitely doesn't look polished. I think what I am going to do is delete those out and come back through with some of the painless glass panels and fill in that area with those, and just kind of have to put up with some of the little overlaps looking slightly odd in the top of the ceiling. We'll probably have to add a beam as well to the top of it, or something to cover up some of the little gaps that we'd have, because we're just not going to be able to get it in perfect without it looking a little bit odd. But if you look from further away, it's not too bad, and I was actually pretty happy with it at the time. It's just the more I look at it and the closer I see in the details, the more it bugs me. It's something I think about when I'm sleeping at night. And it does also mean, because we use these wall pieces, these glass panels now actually stick out through the wall on the side where the information booths are. So because of that, I was actually forced to put a tower into that side, which we'll come onto, a big circular tower. But actually, I think that was a massive kind of yay win to having a flaw in what we were trying to build here, because I love how these towers look by the end of the build. So coming onto the roof, I just went for the basic corrugated plastic roof. And the reasons for this was obviously the fact that it's white, firstly. Kind of blends into the rest of our building, but actually the most important reason for it was the beams on the underside of it. Because when you're inside, the roof actually looks pretty cool, even though it is corrugated plastic. But the beams really add to it, because we've got this huge vaulted ceiling. I definitely want beams running along it, and the fact that we're choosing a roof with beams already added really adds to the ease of the build. So that's really the reason for this choice. I wouldn't have gone for a roof without any of those beams on it, because some of the roofs can look pretty flat on the underside, so definitely worth considering how it looks from the inside as well if you're really into the little details like me. And then because this roof doesn't really sit nicely directly onto a glass wall with a very thin beam at the top of it, we added a little bit of cladding around it. And this also really helps roofs. I do this quite a lot in terms of kind of finishing off roof edges, because really from the outside you don't want to see the edges of those beams sticking out. That's not hugely realistic, and definitely not for a kind of feature entrance building way like this one. So we just used the Conservation Pack cladding beams for this, recoloured them into a nice kind of grey colour to fit the theme. It kind of matches the stone wall that we've gone for, the rustic stone wall for the staff area of the building and the little towers that we're going to add in a second, but also kind of complements the grey and the black that we've got on the rest of the building. Pretty muted colours, but I quite enjoy it. And it's also pretty similar to the plaster base that we put around the wall as well. So I put this all around the roof edges, and we do eventually add the corrugated plastic roof to the actual sort of gift shop side of the entranceway as well. And then finally we add this little beam along the top as well, just to cover up some of those gaps in the wall, because we've got a bit of roof overhanging where the vaulted ceiling ends on the highest point. So I definitely wanted some beams to cover that up. So the next thing we're doing here is, when I was looking at the building and pictures of it, I noticed that there were these beams on the inside of it, right above the doorway. So we're using, again, just the basic planetzoo metal beam, recoloured to black, as all of the beams pretty much in this build. And we're just creating a pattern similar, again, to the photos of the actual real building. And I think this turns out kind of quite nice. It's a little bit of something extra and interesting, a bit of architectural stability, I suppose, to the building is probably what it is. I was going to say design, maybe not so much that. But it adds a bit of something extra and a little bit of depth on the big glass window above the door as well. And for something like this, where we've got the diagonal beams in, switching to the world axis from your relative axis is going to keep it nice and stable. This whole building is actually built on the world axis because it's directly parallel to the edge of the map, essentially. So that's what the world axis is the map axis. And the relative axis is obviously the axis of the individual pieces you put in. So actually building on the world axis is probably my number one tip for any building in this game. It severely helps, because then when you want to switch to moving up, down, left, right, etc., you can just revert to the world axis when you've got a diagonal piece like this and move it smoothly across. Super useful. And then to finish off the back of the building, I moved this glass wall all the way back. We don't want to rebuild it, so obviously we just copy these pieces and move it to the back. And to start off with, I thought I was going to put the entrance gates actually directly underneath this glass panel wall. But it turns out, obviously I didn't think about this, we're only 6 metres wide on this entranceway, and we need at least 8 metres to get 2 entrance gates in side by side, so it just doesn't work here. So in the end I actually flip it round and do it off the side. And eventually, in the end, I do convert this entire wall to floor-to-ceiling glass, which looks absolutely awesome. So you walk in the entrance doors and you have this huge glass wall directly in front of you, looking out onto the main entrance plaza the other side, which we'll be doing in the next episode. But it is a really, really nice view, so I'm pleased with how this comes out. And then you can see me here just adding in some of the internal walls. So again, we're just copying the limestone pattern all the way through this building. We've got a bit of the rustic stone around the information, the ticket booths on the back of the building that you can see there. But the rest of it really is limestone with extra beam decorations and obviously the plaster footing to the wall as well. So we're essentially just getting the rest of the wall pieces in here and then making sure that we have got space for these entrance gates, which actually fit in really, really nicely here. It does mean the gift shop area actually ended up being a little bit smaller than I had probably originally intended it to be. But when I come to put in the gift shop, I realise actually it's quite a large space, so it wasn't too much of a trouble in the end. And then with this back area, because we've got the entrance gates there, I wanted to simulate an exit through the gift shop. So instead of going back through the entrance gates, even though that is, of course, what the actual guests do, because that's just their behaviour in Planet Zoo, I decided to add this door directly opposite the exit door at the front of the building to take you through to the gift shop so that you can get out of the zoo. So again, it's a simulated exit as opposed to actually being a functional one. But I think it's a nice little detail and something to think about when you're designing your entrances, particularly if you're not using the standard default entrance that they all come with. Zoos would have a separate entrance to exit, so this kind of made sense to me, even though functionally they don't use it. And the path network underneath I do eventually change so that it's not connected through that wall, so they cannot walk through that wall, they have to go back out the entranceway, just to make sure there's no kind of cheesing going on when they walk in and don't pay. And then because I was going to change this pathway again so that they can't go out that exit gate, I decided to cover the entire floor with flooring. To be honest, I was going to do this anyway because we do have tiny little grass borders at the edges of our paths and we definitely want to cover that up. So I thought a nice wooden floor in here would be quite nice. We're using the painted wood piece in order to fill this entire floor lowering it right down so the Sims won't sink their little feet into it as they walk through. And initially I played actually with using some of the guest barriers to stop them being able to skip the entrance gates, but I do later just change the path so they physically cannot walk there. Now skipping on to the back of the building, I didn't want to have the vaulted roof over the entranceways, and I wanted to create a nice little kind of natural piece out of this because we've got an awful lot of just white limestone wool here. It feels quite sort of dominant and daunting, and I do want, like I said, this zoo to have quite a natural feeling to it. So we used some of the Australian wooden wall panels to cover over the entrance so we could give it a roof. And then on top of that, we used some of the conservation planted panels to give ourselves this natural green roof on top of it. I absolutely love these pieces. Like, I don't use them enough, honestly, but having this green roof to it really adds like a little bit of extra something. And you'll see we do a little bit more of that on the other side of the building in just a second. And of course we want to cover up some of the Australian wooden floor pieces there, so we use again part of our plaster blocks that we've created into a beam, just to create a structural beam over the actual entrance gates here. And I do also go ahead and add a few extra plants on top of the planted green pieces there, just to give it a little bit of extra dynamic. I toyed with the idea of putting a tree up there, and then I thought actually no, the base is not deep enough to sustain tree roots. So we just went for a few actually sort of tropical style plants, and only just a couple of them, just to add that little bit of extra height onto our roof. And then to finish it off, we also add some cladding to cover up the gift shop and exit doorway and provide a little bit of shelter just around those entrance gates, which also helps to finish off the building as a whole, I think. Otherwise you're looking at this very plain white wool when you come in, so adding these little bits of extra detail around them really help to make it stand out and blend in at the same time. Now with the cladding pieces, again these are from the conservation pack, they're kind of weird because if you put them in a roof shape like this, there is no support between the beams, which is just completely unrealistic. So we do go ahead and use the marquee beam from the European pack, which is a lovely small metal beam here, and just place it through the cladding beams at the end to make it look like they are actually adjoined. And then finally add in a little pillar to support it on that corner as well. And we're going to do a lot more work on the exitway and the main sort of entrance plaza once you're in the zoo in the next episode, so we will come back to that. But we do have a lot of work to do on the staff area of the building. So like you will have seen earlier, we're using the rustic stone wall pieces for this. And we're creating quite a large area for this because I want to get a quarantine, a big staff room, because I feel like there's going to be a lot of staff activity around this area in general. And also, of course, the trade centre into here. So it's kind of going to be the main central staff hub for the zoo. Obviously, we'll have loads more staff areas dotted around. It's not going to be the only one, but it is an important one, I think, here by the entranceway. But here you can see me adding in these like turrets around the front. And really, yeah, the only reason why I did this is because I needed to cover up those bits of the glass panel which stuck out of the wall really annoyingly. But I love how this looks. It's kind of odd. It's like old meets new in this building. It's almost like there was an old, almost castle-like building tucked in there, and they built this modern glass and white and black extension onto the side of it. So yeah, yeah, I quite like the contrast between the rustic stone and all the white plain limestone of this building. So we create these two turrets at either end, and I did do one at the back as well because obviously we've still got that glass panel that's sticking out, so the same issue applied at the back there. And we cover the top of them in mulch so that we can again do these lovely planted green tops to our turrets, which just again help this very white, very stark building blend into the natural environment around it. And that's probably not really going to come through until we've got about 3 or 4 episodes into this, when all the foliage and the landscaping around this entrance come into play. And then hopefully you'll see that this helps it blend in quite a lot more. So coming onto that staff area, just placing in the staff buildings here. And then I decided to actually add in a toilet at the back. I thought having a toilet around the entranceway was absolutely essential. Like pretty much all zoos would have that. So I thought, let's try and tuck it into one of these turrets. which, because I'd actually built the roof on it already, proved a lot more difficult than I had thought it would, honestly. So I spent a lot of time playing around with the orientation of the staff buildings to get this in right. But in the end it works, and then we do a little bit of detailing to this toilet area. So I actually completely cover up the entrance to the toilets with the rustic stone wall. Add in a little bit of the Australian flooring, because we get the quarter circle panels to that, so we can fit it really nicely around the edge of the turret. And then we add doorways in front of each of the toilet entrances, so it kind of simulates actually a real toilet as opposed to just walking into the black abyss. So they can literally directly walk through these doors and into the toilet, which I really, really like indeed. And then I do just come in and add our first kind of touches of real detailing in here, with a little plant in the corner, a few lights, and a little clipboard on the wall as well, which I always like to do in toilets to kind of mark, oh hey, yeah, they have been checked an hour ago, you know, like you quite often see in public toilets and that sort of thing. I think the big challenge with this though was the door on the outside of it, because we're obviously adding a door to a curved wall. So you can see me here just placing a few beams behind the door, so it is going to stick out quite a lot more than I generally like for a doorway out of the wall, but the beams sort of help to almost make it a little bit porch-like on the outside actually. So I think in the end, it kind of looks pretty cool as a little toilet block. Then on the front of the building, we've got our large staff room with the windows pointing out, so I thought actually let's make the windows visible. So any guests out in the main forecourt in front of the zoo could actually look into it. And I know they probably wouldn't want to look into a staff room, it would probably be more like a research centre or something. But we're going to pretend it's something slightly more interesting than a staff area, let's say. And then we just add a slate roof to the area, but I didn't want to get too high with this and take away from the turrets or take away from our vaulted ceiling glass foyer area. So we add a flat roof to the middle of it. And then internally we use the metal plank walls again to detail out the staff area, along with a breeze block floor. I feel like that's all that's really needed for the staff. Sorry staff, you get breeze blocked when everyone else gets some lovely laminate wood flooring. And then I decided to add in a few little kind of props and little details out the front of here, as if staff have sort of come to the staff room or come to quarantine or the trade centre or whatever on their way to other habitats, that sort of thing. So we've got a few wheelbarrows, we've got some crates lying around, like the staff have just dumped a few odds and sods, as it were, in the little staff foyer area. And then finally we have a couple of crates with some food in it as well, as if the keepers are about to take the food down to another habitat. They've collected it from the main delivery area, which we are going to come onto in a later episode, which is going to sit just outside this building at the end of the staff road inn, which I'll show you when we come to do the walkthrough today. That's all going to get fleshed out as a kind of central delivery area. So I think it's realistic that they could have crates of food that they're about to take down to other habitats, but they just nipped into the staff room for a cup of tea on their way. And then before we come to the walkthrough, I just want to show you a little snippet of some of the finer details that we put in, starting off with this welcome sign that you can see here. So we just use some of the traditional lettering for this. I'm actually not going to use any workshop assets for this zoo unless it's something that I have created myself and turned into a blueprint. And we're also obviously not going to be using any mods as well. So we have really just got the lettering that comes with the game, unless I decide to attempt to create another font out of little pieces, which maybe we'll do, but I doubt it, honestly. So we have this big welcome sign over next to the entrance gates, which I thought would be a nice feature, so when you walk in the main doors you can clearly see where you need to go to the zoo. And then this little trick is kind of cool. If you use one of the customizable signs, so one of the signs that you can write on, so that's what we're doing here to say to the zoo, and then you just sink it back into the wall just a little bit, the writing actually pops through as if it's sticking off the sign. So you can get rid of the look of the sign, particularly if you use these New World metal signs that I've used here. It works really, really well with those. Less so with some of the other ones with borders, obviously that wouldn't work at all. But for these, because they're completely flat front, it does. So you can sink it into the wall, the sign disappears, and you've just got the writing on the wall. And then we turn the information booths into little ticket offices by adding these awnings, and also a big sign above them, obviously saying tickets to anyone who it's not obvious for. And alongside that, I thought because we are building a zoo, there would also be some information about the zoo, the cause, what it's doing, Zoos are generally charities and doing conservation work, so I thought it would be nice to kind of showcase, I guess, some of the work that the zoo's done. So I used 3 of the conservation boards for this, just chose some random advertisements for them, and then created this little board above saying our mission, which I thought was a nice little touch for this area. So people could clearly see some of the work that the zoo's doing before they even enter the actual park itself. And then back out in the car park, obviously we haven't placed the guest spawners yet, and I am going to be completely deleting the bog standard guest spawner and entrance gates. Obviously we've now put in our own entrance gates. So we're using the buses from the European pack as entrance gates here, and I kind of actually sort of forgot about them because I was going to leave room next to my road to have them on the side of the car park. So I didn't do that. So instead I created this lay-by on the other side of the road, and you can see me putting that in now. Because you can't put paths underneath the buses, I decided to actually use a little bit of the asphalt roof, which I thought blended in okay to the concrete path texture that we've used for our main road there. And I will say there's a lot of detailing still to be done on the road that we'll do further down the road, excuse the pun. I just spent hours doing this absolute entrance, and I was really keen to get onto the actual zoo, to be honest, so we'll come back to the road at another time. But yeah, we create this little lay-by, and then it obviously dawns on me that the buses are facing the wrong way, so the guests are literally getting out of the bus onto the main road. Not a good look. So you'll see when we do the tour later, I do turn these around and create a little pavement pathway to bring them down to the main zoo entrance with a little zebra crossing as well, so we'll show you that in the walkthrough. And then in the car park, I used just the little Jeep assets for cars. Again, like I said, I'm not using workshop assets, so I don't have the luxury of getting some nice cars. So what I did with these was just recolour several of them, so it gave it a little bit more variation and put some of them facing in different directions, so it wasn't too uniform in that sense. A little bit of off angles here and there. I think it fits in all right, and at least it simulates a car park rather than being super realistic. Everyone in this world drives a Jeep. That is the only car available. That's the law that we're going to say for this. Outside the front of the zoo as well, we do add in the flower beds, as I mentioned. I use the colourable temple brick piece to frame these because it's quite nice and small to make circular patterns with, but also big enough that actually we can hide benches underneath it. So that's what you can see me trying to work on here, because I really wanted to get the effect of people sitting on the wall outside the front of the zoo. Of course, no one actually sits here because they're not tired before they've actually entered the zoo. But it's sort of pointless in this place, but at least it is there in case anyone actually did want to sit on them. So it is quite a nice piece for hiding those away. And then of course we do come in and add the mulch pieces along with some little flowers and plants on top of it. Nothing too particularly fancy or organised, a little bit rough and ready, but just to add some nice colour and detail to the front of the zoo. And then around the staff room windows here, the walls look super plain unless you frame them against these staff buildings. So I added in a couple of the Arctic beams actually on the top and the bottom of the windows, just to give that a little bit more depth, and yeah, it just looks a bit better. It feels a little bit more comfortable to me, other than just having a random window sunk into the wall with no frame whatsoever. Back in the car park, we also add this little log border, as I mentioned earlier. Again, just trying to bring in that nature theme into the car park, have it not be too concrete-y and not too man-made, even though obviously logs sunk into the ground is definitely man-made. But they just help to frame the edge of the car parking spaces here, so I really like how that looks. And then finally, to finish it off, I do build a bit of a semblance of a gift shop. This needs a lot of work. I was actually tempted to not put this into this episode, but I did anyway, but I'm not really super happy with it. I do use the counters for Looney Balloons and also just a memento here instead of the souvenir shop. I've had nothing but trouble with guests getting stuck in those. So I didn't want to use the actual souvenir shop, so we built our own custom counter out of the limestone wall pieces, and then a couple of the art shapes just coloured to black to create a nice long consistent counter between the two little service points here. And then we come in and fill the souvenir shop with the actual souvenir shop props and assets. So obviously they're not functional, people aren't going to buy them, but it is a really nice easy way to fill a souvenir shop with all of the different souvenirs without actually having guests getting stuck in it. And then finally we add a couple of our animal signs onto the wall just to help give it a little bit more decoration. Otherwise we're looking at really tall, very white, plain walls in here. And I think you can kind of imagine that some of these pieces are available for sale so people could buy them as art pieces. That's what I'm thinking at least. But this is bringing us pretty much to the end of the build. There's a lot of smaller details which I haven't shown in this video. Like I said, I didn't want it to be just a straight up speed build. I wanted to show you the most interesting parts. So what we will do now is dive into a walkthrough and I'll take you through the final build. Okay, so here we are at the bottom of our road, which extends to nothing at the moment. Again, lots of detailing to be done on this road work, which we will get to. But yeah, here we have the staff entrance sign, main entrance. When they're driving along this road, they can clearly see where they need to go. If I just zoom down the staff entrance very quickly, I've used a gravel path for this, which I thought was a little bit nicer, a little bit more rustic than the roadway. Yeah, we come to these gates. So I made a slightly larger version of the side gate, which I'll show you in a second here, to act as our staff entranceway. Really like how these little bracket pieces work. That's the lock on it. And I did also create a security entrance point so you can scan your card to get into the backstage area. Obviously, this whole area is going to be patched up in a future episode. It's not going to be left like this, but at least the gist of it is there for now. If we come back as well, there's lots more to do around here. I want to add in a ton more undergrowth and kind of really make it feel alive. Also, these hills need a little bit of work on them as well, shall we say. Let's go back to the main road and then we're going to come down towards the main entrance over here. You can kind of get a sneaky peek actually if we look through here, down towards the main entrance building across the grass, through the car park. And yeah, we come onto the little coach lay-by across this side, which I think is fitted in quite nice. It's kind of a shame actually that the doors aren't on this side because they feel like sort of big blocks of colour, but it is a lot more realistic, obviously, to have the people exiting from the coach over here. So yeah, they come out this side now. This is the little revision I made later on when I realised my error. And then they walk along this little path, which I kind of really like how it's overgrown as well on the side. And we've got big hillsides coming up here, which are only going to get bigger as we extend on into the park. So yeah, they come down this little pavement here, and I'll actually slot in some shots so you can see the pedestrians walking around here as well. So the path that I've used is completely unconnected to the road, so they're not going to walk on the road, which is quite nice. And then they come across to this zebra crossing and cross over into the main entrance. So yeah, you can see the zebra crossing here. I've just used a couple of little log pillars to signify bollards to make sure cars aren't going to go straight into the pedestrian areas. And then this road goes on round, so I will show the kind of top-down view for you in just a second. But yeah, let's go on into the car park to start off with. I used the mulch piece here just to signify a little bit of difference from the actual car park area, but it's kind of cool. Really love how these logs work, sunk into the ground, like a half log barrier for the car park. I'm using a lot of the, is it salt? I always forget the name. Common saltwort, that's the one. And bracken as kind of the main sort of overgrown area. Flora, as it were. Lots of tiger trees around here, including a couple of additions just to get a little bit more colour in different places as well. And I will also use some temperate trees, so I will mix those in. Things like oaks and elms, we'll definitely have those in the park as well. But yeah, loving the sort of forested mountain vibe. And I think it is nice having these extra mountains in front of the sort of backdrop ones as well. Adds a little bit more dynamicism to it. It is a shame we only have Jeeps in the car park. But there we go. Yeah, it works quite nicely. I will actually just come out here as well because you can see we've added in street lighting and we've also got lighting around the car park, low level ones. These are the aquatic lights that I've used for this. Just sunk into the ground quite a lot. Just noticed this one's overlapping, so we'll amend that. But yeah, we've got these little zoo parking signs as well, so I'm quite liking this. It's a very simple format of sign, just with two little logs behind it, using a curly bracket as the arrow into the zoo. So yeah, that's the car park. Pretty simple, actually, really. And then we come on to the main building itself. So I wanted to get the penguins in, as I mentioned, but they didn't really work on this side of the car park. Like, they're kind of a little bit hidden. So I've used them all along the front up here, as you can see, outside the entrance and the exit, and a couple down this side as well, which I think look pretty cute. Let's just head on over here, because I do like the fact that you can see in here it should be a research centre, not a staff room, so I may change that when we come to redo this staff area up here. We're going to add in a big delivery point and road access down into what is going to be a valley, as I mentioned, down this side over here. So yeah, that whole area is going to have a lot of work to it. And then we've got the staff gate over this side, again with one of those little checkpoints. They can scan their security card to get through the gate. Yeah, I quite like that. And I've left one of the gates open as well, just to add a little bit more interest to the area. Because of course they won't actually use doors and gates. We have a staff path hidden under here to make sure guests won't actually walk this way. And I just used, again, the rustic stone flooring, changed the colours a little bit so it didn't match the building entirely, and covered that up because I can't stand how the staff paths look. They look absolutely awful. This will all be covered up, this area, obviously. Loads more work to be done on it. Let's go in here first before we go in the main entrance. So yeah, we've got the doorway here, just added a beam across the top of it for a little bit of extra decoration. When we come in, we've got a quarantine, staff room and the trade centre. So nice and simple in here, just the kind of basic starting services. Obviously we're going to need keeper huts, veterinary services, all the rest of it. So we will come on to that. I've just used, again, these metal beams as kind of headers to the doorway, adds a little bit more interest, and above and below the windows there. I've used the aquatic lights to decorate it as well. And then just a bunch of stuff, which is a little bit willy-nilly. It might be better to actually have some sort of set storage facilities around here, so we may come back and do that. But let's head on all the way back around to the actual main entrance. I'm loving these flower beds too, and also the hidden benches in here. Like, hopefully one day I will actually see someone sit out here, which I think would be pretty cool. But there we go, you can see our beams on the top here, just how nicely they work. Without it, it would feel like quite flat. So yeah, really like just tiny, simple extra detail, which really helps to bring it alive. Got the entrance sign over here. We do also have the no entry sign, because this is meant to be the exit. And I've used some of the New World lighting about the place as well, just to help if we're in night mode ever. So you can see through to the gift shop there. But let's go in the main entrance. I've added a couple of little animal signs here, just to show, like, you need to walk on this way to the zoo. I might actually open these doors as well, to have them open so people aren't actually walking directly through the door. But for now it's like that. Also got this little monkey with some leaves here, which I quite like, just to help decorate up this side of the wall. We've obviously got our ticket booths, hello, who's very happy. So is she. Oh, hello. Ticket sign, our mission, obviously looking at what the zoo is doing to help conservation efforts. And then of course the little welcome sign here. Really love that trick with the customisable signs, which goes on round to the exit in the gift shop. Of course, this whole area, we're going to be doing this in the next episode, so there will be a really nice view out of here onto a viewing deck looking down into a huge valley with a lake at the bottom of it. That's essentially the idea. Really love the height of these ceilings. It doesn't feel too dominating. Oh, I've just noticed that poking out. I need to fix that as well. You always spot something else. Yeah, it doesn't feel too dominating. Really nice floor to ceiling glass there. I will come in and get rid of these so we're not seeing those panes in there as well. Added a couple of little fan lights to the top too, which I quite enjoy, just hanging down there. And then of course we've got the structural beams up this side, and then the gift shop. So yeah, this is the finished gift shop, which again, like, I'm not really happy with. It works. I don't know if I'll change it or not. I'm not a huge fan of building gift shops, I'll be honest. So maybe it just stays like this. It's not too bad. I just feel like it needs something better on the walls to really bring it to life. I did put in a couple of these little umbrella and poster stands out here by another two very happy staff members. Little exit sign over there, and then yeah, just more souvenir shops here. So the actual path itself runs out of this door underneath the ground. I think if I click on it we can show you. Yeah, there. So it runs out of this door, across here, and through here, and then round the back. So they can't actually walk through this exit way. It's not connected, which I think is probably the best thing. So they don't skip those entrance gates. But it does mean, unfortunately, when the people come in, they come in from the coaches across here and in the exit door. So it may be that I actually put a guest barrier here to stop them from doing that. So they do have to walk in the main entrance. might be a little bit nicer. And again, I'll put these barriers here, so people coming in could go into the gift shop if they wanted to, like it's not, you know, it's not closed off to them, but also sort of making sure people going out aren't kind of clogging up the entrance area to give ourselves a distinctive area for it. But yeah, there we go, that is that. We just head on out the back quickly before we go and have a little look at the top-down view. Here's the back of the building here. Lots of work to be done, so there will be a lovely little flower bed, I think, over here. We're probably going to have some big statue in the middle, something like that. And then, yeah, the final piece is this little toilet block here. So if we go inside, you can see we've got the doors to our toilets, little vents as well, of course, the plant, the clipboard, which I love. I have to put that in every toilet pretty much that I build. And then, yeah, if you go through these doors, you go directly into the actual toilet cubicles. So, yeah, like how that sits, like how that sits. We've got the ceiling in here as well, so we're not seeing any of the ugly roof pieces that we have put in here too. So if we come out of that mode, here is the overall start to our zoo. And like I said, we've got this road wrapping around here. The height elevations, it is raised up, and this will go up. I think it's going to cut through the mountain essentially, so this will be even higher this side. I have a whole mountainous area sweeping across the edge of the zoo here, and then the valley this side. Going to be super cool, I think. Yeah, the car park looks quite nice from bird's eye too, with the little green strip in the middle of it. Yeah, very much enjoying that. And then the main building, you can see those little pops of green in amongst all the white and stone and black of that main building. Yeah, pretty pleased with it. Pretty pleased with it. I think we've managed to capture the vibe of Belfast Zoo here. Anyone who's actually been to that zoo, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear that. But also kind of spruced it up and made it our own at the same time, and that's what I really like to do when finding inspiration. Not necessarily copy exactly, but make it work for what we can do in the game and also what I want to see too, which is lovely, pretty, colourful flowers apparently. So yeah, that's the start of our brand new zoo, and if you have enjoyed the episode, please do remember to like, comment, share, hit subscribe if you're new to the channel, and if you'd like to support the channel further, there are ways to do that in the description below. But that is all from me for now, so thank you so much for tuning in. I'll catch you again next time. Bye bye!